I want to welcome my guest, Mr. Adam Carriker, who has a show here on 93.7 The Ticket, the Adam Carriker Show, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 12 to noon. One of the best shows here on The Ticket and in Lincoln, so don't miss that. But as many of you who maybe have heard the show might have seen, he actually is a wrestling fan, so we got to bring him on here. And Adam, I don't know if you have, if you can see the Starter Heyman Jewelers video stream in front of you, but it shows a certain wrestling photo to put up here on the screen of you.
Oh, well, I cannot see it, but I don't have to imagine very hard what it is. Why are you staring at my baby oiled up body, Jake? That's a little weird.
See, there you go. You knew exactly which one it is. Because very quickly, can you give a brief history? I mean, you've done some wrestling radio in the past in DC, correct?
Yeah, so I had a show called Fourth and Pain. My co-host was Chuck Carroll. He was actually in the wrestling business for a while, but it was Fourth and Pain. It was actually half Washington Redskins football and then half pro wrestling. And so Fourth and Pain was the perfect name. But yeah, we talked a lot of pro wrestling. It's interesting about that picture. I lost a bet to Goldberg when Nebraska lost to Georgia in the Gator Bowl 15 years ago. So that's how old that photo is. But my poor daughter, Addison, last year, 7th grade, middle school, back where we lived, one day her teacher somehow saw that photo, put it like on the overhead. I don't even know if they use overheads anymore, but put it on the screen for the whole class to see, and then goes, "Addison, is this your dad?" She has been scarred ever since that thing was put up in front of the whole class.
Yeah, that's not good. At least, I mean, you put on everything. I mean, you're ready to go. Like you said, you even kind of oiled up for the photo. So you should have done the bet the year afterwards. Nebraska beat Georgia in the bowl game, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, he ducked me, or I don't remember what happened. And I didn't just put on a little baby oil. I just had, so what you can't see in that photo is I had a knee brace on. We cut it off just above the knee brace to show my lower quad, but I hadn't worked out in 5 weeks, and I was uber concerned that I hadn't worked out in 5 weeks. And Chuck was like, "Hey man, just throw in a bunch of baby oil. Wrestlers do it to make their muscles pop." And so I was like, "Man, I ain't worked out in 5 weeks. I'm lathering this baby up." And that was the unfortunate product that you got as a result.
Well, you didn't have any long hair, because I know the other thing they do is just drench their hair in water before they come out. I don't know why, but it looks better. So I don't know. There's certain things that in wrestling business, little secrets there. But I did also want to ask you, I know you've mentioned before, was there a time where you were close to thinking about trying to become a wrestler?
Yeah, so it was kind of on my radar, so to speak. And with the whole Fourth and Pain show, you get if you listen to the Adam Carriker show, you're sitting right there every day. I kind of do my thing, and I'll go off, and I come over prepared, and then I go off script half the time, and then I try to follow the other half. But with the pro wrestling show that Chuck and I were doing, we'd flat out cut promos on each other. We were ruthless at times too. There was a couple of times we didn't talk to each other for a while. But we were pretty ruthless. Like, we were WWE style promo talking about, mostly wrestling, but also some Redskins football. It's supposed to be 50-50. And so there was a couple of people that I knew that were connected to the WWE that heard about it. Well, they knew of the show, and they actually reached out, and they had me do like a Skype interview. And they wanted, basically a regular interview, but then they wanted me to cut a promo. And so I cut a promo on Vince and whatnot, and he ended up falling out of the chair because he was laughing so hard. And so afterwards, they called me later, and they offered me, and they said, "You are as advertised." And I assumed that meant the promo, they liked it. I turned him down because at the time, this was all a while ago, I wasn't officially retired from the NFL. So I was trying to make a comeback, obviously failed at that. But they called me about a week later, and they were doing that whole Tough Enough thing. They had like Mandy Rose and all that on that Tough Enough. I was supposed to be on that. They wanted me to do that, the show. Well, that's what they actually offered me to do, and I said no. They wanted me to do that. Then they said, "Hey, when you're done with the NFL, whenever that is, you can come down here, come to Orlando and train with us at their NXT, their training facility for the wrestlers that they're training." So my wife actually said, "Yes, go do it." And I've known enough wrestlers, like I've known Goldberg, and I interviewed Roman Reigns way back in the day when he was still in the Shield. And both those guys are former football players, obviously high elite level wrestlers. And they both told me the same thing when I asked them what's harder, football or wrestling. They both said wrestling, and they said there's no off season. And I had watched enough of Stone Cold's podcast at the time to know that, he'd been divorced 3 times and you're on the road 300 plus days a year as a wrestler. I don't think it's as bad now, and then the first thing he ever saw his daughter do, she was 15 years old, and he never saw her do anything up until then. And so all that kind of factored into me saying, my exact words to her were, I don't think you know what you're telling me to go do. And I meant that much nicer than it sounded. But anyways, ended up not doing it. It's always one of those things where it would have been cool, but I've never really regretted it because I know enough to know I would have missed being a part of my kids' lives and being around my wife and family.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Still, maybe we could set up a table or something. You can choke slam Lee through it. We could get a little charity event going through it or something. But anyways, let's get into some of the wrestling after, those are great stories. But I did want to ask you kind of about what's going on now, because there's plenty to dissect here. What are just kind of your thoughts on the Bloodline chapter? Of course, it's now the OG Bloodline kind of against the new Bloodline. All of this coming off the WrestleMania main event last year. Has it been interesting enough for you to kind of stay tuned into it? And what do you think about the latest edition, Bronson Reed now joining the Bloodline for Survivor Series?
So, okay. This was, I don't want to say this was fairly predictable, but so WrestleMania was phenomenal. The build to WrestleMania, the audible that they called, Rock turning heel, Final Boss was all phenomenal. But I kind of stopped tuning in for a while. Number one, the family and I were moving, so that took a lot of time. But it was kind of like, all right, The Rock was gone off TV. Roman was gone off TV. I was supposed to buy into Solo as the tribal chief. And I'm not familiar with Tamatonga and a lot of these other guys that started popping up. I know enough about their heritage, their lineage. I get the connection. I know where they came from. I just wasn't interested. And then I tuned in at SummerSlam. Why? Because Roman was supposed to come back, and he did. And I've kind of tuned in sporadically since. But up until Bronson Reed, it's been all too predictable. You've got Solo and everyone over here on this side of the bloodline, and then you got Roman, and now he's the face, and then you've got the Usos reuniting with Roman, and then Sammy was a little bit of a swerve, but not a gigantic shocker. Up until Bronson Reed, it's exciting, it's fun to watch, but it's a little too predictable, so I don't find myself watching the show. I even told you I don't watch the shows. I find myself just going on Twitter once a week. All right, there's that clip, and there's that clip, and I spend 5 minutes, and I'm all caught up, and I call it good. Until The Rock comes back. I tuned in for Bad Blood because I had a feeling, along with a lot of other people, he was going to be there. He didn't do a whole lot, but furthered the storyline, gave you a little tease, slit in the throat, all that good stuff, held up the 3 for some reason. What's that mean? Who knows? But I'll tune in a little bit more as WrestleMania starts to get closer and things of that nature. But I was happy to see the Bronson Reed edition because it wasn't the first thing that was just insanely easy to predict and call.
Yeah, I like that, and I think Bronson Reed's been looking very destructive as of late. Let me ask you though, as you're kind of breaking down there, it's interesting, what kind of bring wrestling fans back in, and so I got a few questions for you, and I don't know which one to start with. I'll start with this one. So the Mike Tyson fight happened. I don't know if you saw the match or the post match interview where Mike Tyson said he wants a shot at Logan Paul, and Logan Paul says. And that he beat him basically in nicer in worse terms, I should say. Is there a chance we're going to see Mike Tyson return to the WWE ring? I mean, that felt more WWE than boxing to me.
That's a great take on that. That hadn't occurred to me because when Mike said that, I was like, "Oh God, be done." What you just did is insanely impressive, not aesthetically pleasing to watch, but insanely impressive at his age. And I know a lot of people think it was staged, and maybe it was. I have my doubts. But when he said that to Logan, I was like, no, I'm not interested in this. But if it were to be in some sort of a WWE ring type fashion, all right, that had occurred to me. I like that twist. I like that swerve. All of a sudden, I'm a little bit more interested now. I like that.
See, I don't know. It might just be because I only know Logan Paul from WWE. I'm not cut up on his YouTube stuff or how he got famous or anything. But that's immediately what I thought. I mean, I thought that would definitely draw eyeballs. But my point in asking these series of questions is there's a lot of chances to draw eyeballs here in the immediate future. The John Cena retirement tour, which is supposed to be in 2025, would that draw you back to maybe weekly television if he's on every week?
Oh, man. Well, real quick on the Logan Paul thing, did you watch when he boxed Floyd Mayweather a bunch of years ago?
Oh, man, I think I might have missed that. I briefly remember that happening, but I don't think I've seen too much of it.
Yeah, it was a few years ago. So he's like a boxer, him and his brother Jake, as you know. But Logan's like a boxer, too. I don't know if I don't know who's better, him or Jake. But, I remember watching that. And he lasted the whole time, but I digress. What was your original question? Sorry, I got distracted.
Oh, you're all right. It's just the John Cena retirement tour.
Oh, yeah.
Would that be enough to kind of draw you back up? Were you a big Cena fan, or was that a little past your prime of wrestling watching, I suppose?
I loved the Doctor of Thugonomics. Loved it. And then when he got drafted to Raw, because for some reason I couldn't watch SmackDown at the time. I don't think it was on UPN still. For whatever reason, I couldn't watch SmackDown. And when he was drafted over to Raw, I was so excited. I think it was like 2005. And that was literally the time when he dropped the Doctor of Thugonomics thing. And I was like, oh, God, week after week, I have to watch this. I was not a fan of the little children bowl full of Fruity Pebbles, John Cena. But I understand the business behind it, drawing in a younger crowd, making tons of money, getting the F out. And I know that was a little bit before all that, going from WWF to WWE. But he did exactly what he was asked to do. He was kind of handed a bowl of crap. Like, to you and me, he's not that appealing. To kids, he was phenomenal in that stage. But week after week, I'd watch him walk into an arena, get booed, and by the time he was done with the mic in his hand, they'd be cheering him. So I love the skill. I love what he brings. He's an all-time great, but I did not enjoy that era under him because of what he was asked to do. And as far as the John Cena retirement tour, I'll tune in when he first comes back. I'll tune in sporadically, but I'm not going to be like tuning in week after week, with all due respect, like I will be anytime I know The Rock's going to be on TV.
Yeah, I know The Rock's your guy, but to kind of follow that up too, once Survivor Series hits, it'll be 1 year since CM Punk's return after 10 years to the company. I kind of thought that his return would have more legs. Of course, now he's had the injury and then the year-long fight with Drew McIntyre, which I think was good at times, repetitive at others. But are you a little underwhelmed by CM Punk's return so far?
I mean, I think so, but I think it's hard when you miss. What did he miss? 4 months, 3 months because of the injury. Now, at some point, you got to recognize the guy gets hurt every time he turns over a notebook piece of paper. Like, oh my gosh. But it's been a little bit underwhelming. The injury definitely played a role in that. I love Drew McIntyre as much as anybody. In all fairness, I think Drew McIntyre is just a notch below, like just a half of a hair of a notch below the level of superstar I would have stuck CM Punk with right out the gate. Like, it was pretty obvious he was going to do something to Rollins. That was like perfect. And then obviously the injury threw it off. Rollins then ends up getting hurt, makes it through WrestleMania, and it kind of throws everything off and out of whack. So in all fairness, I thought the feud with McIntyre was as good as it possibly could have been between those two. Those two couldn't have done much more with it.
Yeah, and I mean they got plenty of chances. I think they had like 7 or 8 matches. Another question I wanted to ask you is about your friend Goldberg. Of course, I think it might have been months or at least weeks ago now, they kind of teased a matchup with Gunther, and there's long been talk about Goldberg's retirement match. Would this be a situation where you think you try to put Gunther over? Do you think Goldberg comes back and maybe has a little run before his final match?
Well, if Gunther's the last match, the right thing to do is the guy going out, does the honors, so to speak. And I think Goldberg would do that for a young and up-and-coming guy. I know he's the champ right now. It's kind of stupid to say young and up-and-coming, but I think he's just going to continue to build. I'm not the biggest Gunther guy in the world, to be honest with you, but he's just going to keep building. He carries himself like a champion, so I'll give him that. If it's not his final match, I would think that they'd want to build to that final match, and you can't lose on the way to the final match. My gut tells me he's got one match left in him in the WWE. If it's Gunther, I think he puts Gunther over.
Yeah, that'll be entertaining one way or the other. And like I said, just all these names that are kind of on deck. Not even to mention, and I'll ask you quickly about this because the women did add a U.S. title to the picture, so a mid-card title, if you will, which I think will kind of help the roster out. Do you think that the women's roster as is carrying on well, or do they miss Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair and now with Rhea Ripley out?
They miss those three.
Yeah.
I mean, Charlotte's an all-time great. Becky's an all-time great. Rhea's going to be an all-time great. Rhea was doing really, really well, and I like the storyline that was going on with Dominic and Liv, and I do think Liv's doing a really good job, and I think the twist with Dominic was really good. And I think there's a lot of good aspects to it. There's just, they need more depth, and they need more of those types of stars, and they need more things like that amongst the women. And when you're missing 2-3 top stars like that, you're going to be short a little bit of the things that I just mentioned they need more of. So hopefully they get them back sooner rather than later. I know Becky's situation's a little bit different, but hopefully they get them back sooner than later, because seriously, those are like 2 or 3 of the greatest of all time right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of funny because I wouldn't say, well, I love the Shield, but my favorite member of the Shield, it was Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins, and then finally Roman Reigns. And of course, Roman kind of took over the company. And I, for the longest time, just never was really into as much his storylines until he had leukemia and had to sit out for a while. And then I realized how much WWE needed him. And that's when I really became a lot bigger of a Roman Reigns fan, is because like when he came back, it was just instantly a lot more entertaining. And so, I mean, there are women out there, that are like that. And I think Charlotte Flair is definitely one of those. Becky Lynch, I think, has to, try to find that magic that she had at one point in time. She's kind of changed her character around here a little bit, but oftentimes some time off can be exactly what a wrestler needs to kind of get that spark going up again.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. Sometimes, absence, when you're gone, the heart grows fonder. I don't know. Sometimes you realize, you don't realize what you have when you have it all the time. It's funny because now Cena comes back to thunderous ovations when he used to come out to thunderous boos week after week. So sometimes absence makes the heart grow fonder. It's interesting with Roman. I remember when we interviewed him on Fourth and Pain. I forget what I asked him, but something about he envisioned himself being the guy one day, and I didn't say anything to him. And it's going to sound stupid now, but I remember thinking to myself, like in my mind, he was number 3 in the Shield. It was Ambrose, then it was Rollins, and then it was Roman. Roman was like the guy that hardly ever talked or whatever in my mind. But he goes, I envision myself being the guy one day and carrying this company. And, at the time I was just going, okay, well, whatever, dude. Now I look like, okay, whatever, dude. Like, how dumb are you to miss that? But I think the worst thing that happened to Roman was Vince. The suffer and succotash and all the stupid stuff he had him do. Once he could just kind of do what was more relatable to people and do things that make more sense to him, he could shine through. Because I'm like, Roman, even when people were booing him out of the building, I'm like, he's really good. Just this stupid crap that he has to do is killing his character. Like, he's actually really freaking good if Vince would just get out of the way. And I know you're not supposed to utter Vince's name now, I guess. I've uttered it like 15 times. Vince. But it's kind of one of those things where once he was out of the way, now you can see what he's really like, and now he's found his aura, and his true talent and ability is shown through.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Final question for you. I don't want to take up too much of your time tonight, as it's getting a little bit late. But I did, now that you mentioned McMahon, there's been a lot of talk about the Triple H era and how he's kind of booked things and where the company's going. And, I'm kind of jumping over here a little bit from place to place, but, with Cody Rhodes being on College Game Day here and Sheamus a couple weeks ago, obviously the connection to Pat McAfee. But I don't, when I do that as a college football fan and as a wrestling fan, I just have to sit there and wonder. I was like, does the average person know who Sheamus is? I don't think so. Does the average person know who Cody Rhodes is? I know he's over, but I don't know if he's at that point. Do you think that wrestling could ever get back to where it was, to where their stars were just Hollywood stars, not kind of wrestling stars?
I absolutely think so. I mean, you think back to Hogan and you think back, I remember Warrior going on Arsenio Hall and giving like the worst interview ever, but he was on the show, if you've ever seen that interview. And then Austin and Rock, they were transcended at the time. Obviously, Rock is still transcended with what he's doing, even at higher levels than before. I absolutely think they can. WWE is bigger. They've been more profitable for a long time, even when their product wasn't good. Hence, AEW was formed. But they are bigger and they're better and they're more profitable than they've ever been. And they're becoming more mainstream. Like they're an icon you can click on Peacock anytime you go on. And they got people going on to ESPN, and they even discuss certain things on ESPN every once in a while. It's like they are just, I feel like they're as close as they've ever been to being as mainstream consistently as they've ever been.
He's Adam Carriker. He has a show, again, the Adam Carriker Show, from 12 to 1 every day, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, I should say, on 93.7 The Ticket. Adam, thanks again for joining us. We'll have to get you on again sometime.
Sounds good, man. Anytime, and I'll see you tomorrow.